Welcome to Techspressionism, Salon number 91 on the origins of technology and art. My name is Michael Pierre Price. I'm signing in here from Phoenix, Arizona. And today is February 6th, 2025. And we have a great lineup of artists who have been working from the early 80s and even before and since then, and they have some great insights and stories to share. And first up is Roz Dimon. Welcome, Roz.
Welcome. Hello, everybody. I'm usually reporting from Shelter Island outside of New York City, but I'm reporting from Tybee Island. My husband and I are working remote. Better get going. The clock is ticking. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Colin, and everyone. Okay, here we go. Let me just go into slideshow. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, I added to the origins of technology, of digital art, the origins of perspective, and I have the wrong date, excuse me, but we'll just go forward.
But you're not showing your slideshow. We see the whole screen.
Yeah, we see it in presenter mode, Roz, with the next screen on the side and captions.
Okay, hold on a minute. We did test this. Look, can you see? I'm just playing from start. I'm not in presenter mode. Can you see my screen now?
No.
You don't.
I don't think you're sharing anymore.
You're not sharing right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
It may be that you were sharing a different screen. Of all those different screens you can choose.
Yeah, let me go share. Oh, I did. I shared the wrong screen. I'm sorry. I've got a new computer. I'm in a new place. That was it. Exactly. Thank you, folks. We did test this. Sorry about that. Okay. Slideshow. Are you seeing my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, make up for time here. I'm talking about origins of perspective as well as the early days of where I'm coming from in art and getting into using technology in my work. It's always been for me about connection. And I just want to talk from the point of view of training. I think like most of us, I went to the University of Georgia, Lamar Dodd School of Art, and was very interested in art history as well as just, of course, painting and drawing, which was my major. And it was that perspective of the vanishing point of us being out here and looking really deep into a picture. It's after sort of the medieval period of flat iconography, and we're coming back into humanism, and you're going deep inside a painting. And this continued through, in a way, through, more contemporary movements. We got Impressionism, De Chirico, even a more contemporary photograph where you're looking deep into the distance. We're out here and you're going deep inside a painting. I would say, like, from the beginning, that when I look back at my first show after I graduated and I was in Atlanta, Georgia, that I was really even then kind of going an opposite way. It was like I wanted the paintings to come out and really touch the people from the wall. So my first show of portraits, I was working at an investment. And please turn off I'm hearing someone's voice. My first show was called Talking Heads, and I recorded the portraits, the people, while I painted them. And so in some kind of funny ways, I never thought of myself as a technological person, but I had technology from the very beginning. So when you came into the gallery, all the paintings were speaking. Now these are oil on canvas. We're in the late 70s. I'm getting to be an old bird here, but still pretty alive and kicking. So it was a different kind of perspective. Wasn't long after that I drove my Volkswagen up to New York City to be famous with the other 8 million people. A challenging situation. But the perspective changed because it was just, the information was everywhere. And it's just, I was like overwhelmed and loved the city from the very start. and not just the technology and the squares and pixels and electricity going on in the buildings, but I was interested in the space in between and how we connected one another, and space in between things has always been pregnant with energy for me, even in my drawings. So again, I was thinking about this perspective. Well, I wasn't really consciously thinking about it, but here the perspective was coming from all different sides, in a screen that, as we know now, can share, I mean, infinite information, which is pretty fascinating. So my early pieces were filling up with squares and grids and the New York Times crossword puzzle. And this is called Kevin and Jane Take a Walk in New York. But I was very interested in kind of the immediacy and electricity. Even my drawings are very gestural and fast. Early information paintings. This is what I call the series. Also, again, about people connecting, but you can see those squares. I'm kind of painting this electric pulse I'm feeling in the space between us. And I'm not really even sure what they are. You know, I didn't really know the word pixel at that point, but they were coming in everywhere. I was influenced by people like Nam June Paik, who really reached out with the heart in a way, and so does Laurie Anderson. She was just fantastic. I went to see her perform, and she really connects. Ed Paschke was always a favorite of mine from Chicago. It's tech, but it's human, and it's got emotion and feeling. The cabs were going tech and turning into kind of electric squares. These I'm still in now what we call, of course, now natural media, oils and mixed media on paper. The bars were going pixelated. Pyramid Club, an early club, it was turning into squares. Squares were just coming in there, and I realized my brush, even flowers, you know, there were these squares, and by now I was starting to like draw a grid on the canvas. I mean, there was some mathematical element I was obviously missing. And here's why I reluctantly gave up that brush, but not really. I mean, I've kept doing other, you know, my natural media, but this is one of my earliest digital pieces that I don't think I've ever shared here. And I was just thrilled. I mean, these squares, I was painting with this like ugly block, you know, of a square and 4 colors on an IBM at the School of Visual Arts. And I was just, wow, this was fascinating to me. I think some of my patrons, collectors at the time were just, whoa, this is ugly stuff. You know, it's not ugly, but it's not, you know, it's when you're on an adventure, there's pain, you know, there's suffering. But I was thrilled because I knew I had this medium that was speaking to today through paint. I really entered this, you know, post-code where really the first paint programs were coming in and just so elementary. Resurrection, my plant has died again. Getting more excited, working on a Commodore Amiga, and sometimes filming off the screen. I mean, you know, some of you who are younger might not remember, but there was no internet, and there was no way to even get the painting to Baldev de Gaulle to make it fabricated into anything else until, so I had this Catch the Burglar camera that I would use RGB and somehow get it out to make it into a physical thing, which I think is another big topic we could talk about. This is History's Interloper Intruder, commenting on the plug, one of 8 pieces in AT&T's collection. Things were moving up. I was getting into 80 deluxe paint, 88 colors, really thrilling. Lost in a City of Dreams. The perspective is that information is just everywhere. You know, it's flat, but it's flat with a million layers somehow. I mean, the miracle of it all has always fascinated me. And going into the late 90s, even my husband had turned into pixels. James, who's such a compatriot and supporter of my work, on a part of it. Well, here he became the subject matter, and he's looking out, and you've got this, I put the toolbox in the screen, and this actually became the buses that were on the tours in Soho would stop at our 3rd floor apartment at 6th and Prince and Charlton, and it was not a scripted part of the tour, but they would look up and go, and who's that? The naked man in the window piece up there. This is a big digital piece. Yeah, and I've talked about this before, but during that period, I was working, starting some of the new media departments at the World Trade Center, where I worked for 10 years, and we lived within 14 blocks of. And I had been working at the Wall Street Journal in certainly a plum position when the towers came down and my world really came down. Trying to keep track of time here. And I was forced just by sheer being in a very sad state, trying to see how I could do art that might, you know, have some meaningfulness for people after such a time. And I took a course. This was just another strange part of this adventure, but fascinating in a way that, I mean, I've never really cared about icons. I'm a very spiritual person, interfaith minister, actually, as some of my friends know. And I don't separate my ministry from my art, which this talk kind of speaks to. But I went to see a show of iconography at the Metropolitan Museum where it said icons were a source of comfort besieged, and my heart was awakened. And I went and actually painted, it's called, you write an icon. And it's really doing a prayer for a week, but it's washes and washes and layers of flat color that is, every layer has symbolism and meaning. And it's not about you, and it's totally Eastern perspective. I mean, we're kind of going back before my first slide of Western teaching, and I wasn't familiar with this language. And I remember my Rabboni stopping my hand, which is kind of connected up to my shoulder in a way, and when I draw, and he said, "Please, Miss Diamond, stop, no expression, you're copying," along with the other 20 people in the room. I think I was the only professional artist taking the course, and it was all about copying, but it was all about love. And
2 minutes, Roz.
oh, okay, I better go. All right, so I'm back to this place where I'm speaking out from the wall. I am wrapping it up. This is one of my icons of Jesus, who I think is a total rad, and he's speaking out from the wall. And I wanted to go immediately into the works that came out of that period, where the speaking to people really came to the fore, and with technology. This is my wall for my first one of my more recent Diamondscape of Havens, a history of 800 years of 300 years of history. And if you can imagine mathematically, you're going across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 generations. You're going down on the left about events, and in the middle is that third dimension of the Z that is where it's all happening for me, and in the Diamondscapes. And I'm doing these pieces on the wall that become these multi-layered infinite information paintings, but they're still about a painting. And here's a young girl actually entering inside the painting.
You can kind of see it right here.
Yeah. What are you looking for?
Pieces on.
Oh, yeah, the document.
It's
Exactly.
fabricated,
Oh, yes, exactly.
a light box with
Yep,
a
you
comb.
can.
So it's still about a
That's
flat
true.
work of art that if the internet's off, it has to be beautiful and it has to work as a work of
Right.
art in a seductive way, which I think is very different than sort of these immersive, I love Rafik
Oh,
Nadal
there's
and
another
everything.
flag on the other side.
This is
That
still a
one's really hard
painting.
to find.
The painting, you go inside,
Yeah.
and it
There's
also has
It's
a,
easier to find the American.
I'm going to keep going.
Kind of see it right here.
I'm bringing up a recent drawing and just saying that, you know, it's all about what connects us is the heart. And this is a drawing of someone you might recognize, kind of a sad character. And for me, it's all about not just the lines, but those white spaces, which one of my earliest drawing teachers pointed out and said, you know, your drawing, it's the marks you don't show that are also filled with space. So this is not a digital piece. This is mixed media, and a little close up there. If I get thrown in prison or anything, please come see me and bring me something good to eat and some wine. I love this group. What connects tech to expressionism? The human heart. Amen. Thanks.
Wow. Thank you, Roz. Beautiful.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we're going to keep the show rolling here. Next up is Cynthia Beth Rubin. You got the floor, Cynthia.
Okay, is the share there? Oh, wait a minute. I got to do it again because I may have forgotten to check share sound. I did forget to do it. I'm sorry. It is completely not intuitive to do that. So a reminder to everybody. So you are now seeing this, right?
Yes.
I just realized one thing, which is some of these are pulled from previous previous presentations, and I forgot to change the timing, so we might have a little, but anyway, this is my very first piece on a Artronics computer. It wasn't meant to be a finished piece, it was just playing, but it shows what we could do in those days, which is basically draw into the computer because there was no scanning, and we could repeat things and change the color and kind of chop them up. And so here it is, like bigger, but you know, I just talked about it. So I'm going to zip along. I don't know why I did that. What I was doing at the time, here's a watercolor. So this is from, I believe, 83. I'm not great with all of my dates, but I was doing a watercolor that had forms taken from nature and had borders and had a kind of geometric form going on in the border. So it fit. A lot of people later would say, oh, your painting was really influenced by the computer, but it was actually that they fit exactly what I was working on at the time, of kind of moving across the page, taking the forms from nature, abstracting them, and working in borders. And eventually, this is the piece that I actually exhibited. So I was showing you the unexhibited pieces as I was feeling my way to this one. You will notice that it's still all flat colors. So this was prior to gradients, working on Artronics. So you'll notice there's compositional structure that's really important in these. So where did it come from? Way back in the, this is 1980, so it's not so far back. I was doing collages, mixed media collages, and prior to that, in the 70s, I had been looking at Persian and Indian manuscripts. I was really interested in the idea of changing my source material so that we weren't always looking at Western wall painting. This was kind of the politics and the aftermath of the Vietnam War. So when I was in grad school in the mid-70s, people were talking about that a lot. You'll notice that I had access to a color photocopier because before the general public did. I was originally from Rochester, and that's where Xerox was based. Their research was based there, but the whole company was based there then. And so using various connections, I got in to use color copier, and you'll see, like, here it is. I was hand drawing, I was using color copier. Some of what looks like hand drawing was actually drawn on a stone. So it was a lithograph that I printed out and was able to repeat. So, and then I cut up old drawings, and I drew around it, and I broke the borders. And in some ways, you know, if people know my current work, I'm doing the same piece. At some point, I got interested in Hebrew manuscripts. It actually just World Trade Center reference. I was meeting my father in New York on a Monday in the days that all the museums were closed except for the Jewish Museum. So that's how I found the Hebrew manuscripts. I kind of stumbled in, but he had a meeting at the Trade Center, and he wanted to have lunch there on the top of the whatever it was called, Windows on the World. And I was like, no, you know, and I insisted we go off and go to some hippie place somewhere else. But so I never got to eat there, but I always associate the discovery of the Hebrew manuscripts with that day. So it turns out when I was planning this talk, I didn't realize I would be sitting in my living room where that painting is behind me. And this is an interview that I had early on. And I was scanning all these things. I thought what was really interesting was that I said that it was stimulating and that it will do the stuff you couldn't do any other way. It's like any other medium, really, but it has less technical problems than other media. So other people, they misquoted me. I don't make grammatical errors. It's other media. What's interesting is that people focused on how challenging the computer was, but for me, it was a natural. I had a more awkward relationship with paint than with the computer. And it also brings up this whole idea of materialities. So these are the books that I read over and over. I wish I could say I was reading women and people from more diverse backgrounds, but no, I was reading these people with German backgrounds, men, and Hegel's phenomenology of mind, of when something becomes an object, and how we look at the collection of characteristics in order to understand what the object is, was very influential. And of course, Hans Hofmann, push-pull. Also, when I was an undergrad, I studied with Paul Scheretz, who was obsessed with the idea that film was the image, but he scratched into it. Like in this piece, this is a still from his work Section Stream, which I talked about quite a bit with Paul when he first screened it on the large screen, and just the way that he had wanted to bring out the fact that it was a material, that film is actually a material. And then there was the image. So I think one of the ideas that I wanted to bring up is this difference between material and working with the computer, which to me almost has no material. And it's one of the things that I think is a reason why art historians and critics may be more drawn to the algorithmic art, because I think it has more of the evidence of the material. I'm just going to skip over this because I've been talking about these pieces, but I feel that one of the great things that we have in digital art is that it erases the material. The image stands on its own. It's kind of a pure image. So this is also in the AT&T corporate collection. Interesting. They collected some of our work from those days, but do they ever show it? Not that I know of. It was a big deal when gradients came in. Yes, we had to photograph the screen, and the only way we would know what was on our big floppy disks was by keeping a notebook like this, because there were no icons, there was no hard drive. It took forever for the image to load. And so here's my notebook. I wanted to show a little bit of this video. And that's probably enough of that video. Just to come back for a second, I did this with David Smalley, who was a colleague at Connecticut College. And because the palette was held separately from the image in those days, what you could do was create a video by simply having color cycling. The fading in and out of the one photograph we used of trees, I hand drew trees into the computer. We had a scan that cost about $50 in 1986 dollars, so you didn't scan very often. And we did traditional A/B rolls and a regular video suite in order to get that effect. But the color changes came from simply changing the palette, and it looked like things were moving.
You have a couple minutes, Cynthia?
Okay, so I'm just going to jump through into what I was doing later in Avignon. Going backwards and using a basic G2 computer where I hand drew things in. And then this shows the palette. And yes, because you could change the colors, it was possible for the palette to disappear. So you had to be careful. But that piece went on to become a mural that was commissioned by the Connecticut Commission on the Arts. I think it was, as far as I know, this is where I got stuck. Sorry, I didn't check this. So this is was probably the first mural designed on a computer. So you can see how pixely it is. And I think I'm just going to have to do this from now on because I forgot to check what I was doing. Anyway, that's pretty much, I went on more reading. People were talking about where their ideas came from. And one of the things I was really drawn to with the Hebrew manuscripts was the idea that more than one thing was happening at once. So there's like little writing in there, which was what everybody was talking about in those ideas, those days, more than one thing at once. So I went for a long time using the structures of the Hebrew manuscripts, not necessarily the text that was there. And I think that's pretty much where I wanted to stop. I'm just trying to jump ahead here a little bit to show you early scanning, which was only black and white. That organizations were super important to me, going to Sizea, which was an early IZEA in Groningen in 1991, creating community. Some of the questions people were raising about the art at the time. I learned Photoshop from Apple France. That brought a few of us into a workshop in 1991, so I had to learn it in French. Centre Copier gave me an artist residency, so before you could print out easily, and you certainly weren't going to cut something up, I was able to do color photocopies and cut those up, and that just, gave rise through the years to different ways. I'm not going to show this video. I'm going to end here because the video I think is a little long and people can find it online. So here I am. This is my ending slide. Up at the top is a very recent work. At the bottom is an Artronics work. And you can see that I've been doing the same piece for, 35 years or whatever. But still that interest in things moving along and extracting from nature. And that's it.
Thank you. Fascinating presentation. Wonderful work. Thanks, Cynthia.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next artist up is Carter Hodgkin.
Hey, can you tell
Hey,
me how
Carter,
to
welcome.
share again? Hi, where am I sharing from? I forget. Can you see the screen? No, probably not.
Not yet.
Okay. Where is the share button? Oh, got it. Okay, sorry. Okay. I'm gonna zip through this as quickly as possible. My thinking about images and painting was influenced by living in San Francisco in the late 70s. I was exposed to computer programming and digital imaging emerging from Silicon Valley, but I had no special interest in computers and was focused on painting. Go to the next, hold on, sorry.
You want to turn on the presentation?
Yeah. Can you see anything?
Yes, we see your screen, see a slide,
Okay,
you in front of work.
Hit the play button.
thank you.
Okay, good deal.
I'm just not used to doing this. It's been a while. Okay. All right. But encoding images into bits and bytes impressed me as an important extension of artists I was interested in, like Sol LeWitt and Dorothea Rockburn. So in my studio, I engaged in a procedural drawing process, generating abstract sequences of colored squares, which replicated and extended indefinitely. These works resemble a genetic sequencing or computer code anticipating the future direction of my work. Each square was painted with oil pastel on rice paper. Oh, whoops. I created wall size installations using the rice paper panels. Each rice paper sheet was about 3 by 4 feet long, high. And the order of these sequences challenges the viewer, engaging them in a process of pattern recognition. So my aim was to make people more aware of the process of observing or seeing. And again, there's tons of work I did, but no time to see it all now. So when I moved to New York in 1980, there was an ongoing discourse about photography, painting, and the nature of representation, which I felt was not looking at the present. So at the same time, new technologies were digitizing the body through MRIs, SEMs, PET scans, and other techniques. I saw the interpolation of the body by these imaging techniques as an intersection between representation and abstraction. And I looked for ways to place this digital visual language within painting. So I'm going really fast through my whole body of work. So these are just, one image for the whole 10 years. During the 80s to 90s, I used a range of materials and methods, hand painting digitized forms, photo silk screening fragments of DNA, helixes, computer chips, and molecular structures. I was embedding high-tech images in a deliberately low-tech way. My whole body of work has since grappled with this conflict between painting and technology while exposing a new visual universe. In 1978, I was invited to see a friend's research at the Stanford Linear Accelerator in Palo Alto with bubble chamber images. On the left is a bubble chamber, an image of a particle collision from a bubble chamber. And the eccentric linear trajectories created by the colliding particles fascinated me for their random yet precise depictions of force. I drew parallels between physics and the speed of information, rapid change, and complexity in our world. For many years, I combined fractal forms with photosilk screens of particle collisions. And now we're jumping way forward to 2004. I discovered processing, a coding program created by 2 MIT grads. Instead of using other people's bubble chamber photographs, I could use processing to create my own particle collisions. I can simulate collisions and alter particle behaviors to enact forces such as speed, curvature, and gravity. I do this by altering code, which creates behaviors for the particles. And in this process, I feel like I'm drawing with code. So the collisions unfold randomly in frames, which I then capture to create compositions. I layer several frames into a composition, which is imprinted onto handmade rice paper or canvas. I paint over the imprint with gouache and watercolor, teasing out an image. On paper, I exploit the properties of watercolor to interact with the ground, emphasizing touch and violating the perfection of the imprint. Whoops. I've been working with processing since 2004 to create forms, and I've translated these forms into many paintings, works on paper, and other media. This particular work on paper from my electromagnetic watercolor series became a huge mosaic for Queens College in 2010. For Queens College Science Building, I created a 3-story mosaic which simulates a particle collision occurring at the top floor and causing particles to dramatically fall to the bottom. It's a little hard to see. This is an exterior view. I used 20mm blend tile sheets as the ground and 10mm glass tiles for the image. I also employed silver, chromium, and gold tiles to reflect light and convey a sense of motion. I united the interior space by creating mosaics for the building's 9 columns, which you can also be seeing from the outside the building. And in 2017, I created a glass tile mosaic 12 by 45 feet for Capital One's event space at their headquarters in McLean, Virginia. And this is a close-up. I've also created large-scale mosaics for the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota and Neiman Marcus in Beverly Hills. I haven't included them because I didn't think I had enough time. So the code that I have and use can generate multiple frames, allowing me to make animations. This is from the LED lab in New York in 2016. they had these amazing ways of presenting LEDs, and they were very gracious in allowing me to present my work through these configurations like you see here. And last year I received a commission from the MTA Arts, and let me see if I can get this to run. At the Fulton Center in downtown Manhattan. And it consists of 15 animations on a 50 LED screens, varying in a lot of different sizes throughout the Fulton Street transportation hub. This is the biggest wall of LEDs they have here. And then currently I'm working on a series of circular forms, which are translated into paintings. These works are painted and printed collage on wood panels. So I think that's the last one. I think I made it within the 10 minutes and that's my website. Okay.
Wow.
So
Carter, that's just beautiful work. With my physics background, I'm naturally drawn to what you have done. So kudos to you. Brilliant. And your use of different materials is really, really fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So, whoops. I don't know how to get back. Let's see. Where am I? Okay, back on Zoom. All right. So what do I do?
Hit stop share.
Oh, stop. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I always had a problem with that too.
Yeah.
It's up at the very top.
Carter's work is the closest I've seen to what Eudes and Tony Longston and myself did back in the 60s and 70s. With those dots and dashes. Hers is much more beautiful, much more complete and professional looking. We were doing things that were very crude on that cheap paper I showed you, but that's the kind of images that we were able to get out of those early computers. Swirls, circles, dots, dashes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks again, Carter. And on to our next presenter, Victor Acevedo. Welcome, Victor.
Yes, thank you. Welcome. And thank you, Michael, for organizing this. And it's great honor to be here with everybody showing. So thanks for the opportunity. Let me share screen here. Okay. All right, let me just move some stuff around a little bit. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm just moving stuff. Oh. So they're not obscuring my vision. You might be, I think you can see this okay, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, anyway, I love the sort of the directive for this presentation, which was to kind of focus on the early days. So I thought I'd focus on the 1980s and primarily in Los Angeles and how the scene was there and how I kind of interfaced with it and how my work sort of developed in that period. But starting for where I left off in analog media, I went to art school, Art Center College of Design, and I studied analog media. I was a fine illustrator and then a fine art major. And okay, so this just shows, this is a piece called Ectoplasmic Kitchen, and later in 1988, it was selected for to be in this show that was in Spokane, Eastern Washington University in Spokane. So that was kind of a nice validation to be entered into this show. So that was kind of in that decade, a full circle. Well, actually, yeah, it was full circle, but the piece was originally from '87, but I want to go back in time. This is the wrong caption, but this is a model I made. This is where I was in 1983, and that's where I first got introduced, or I actually got hands-on in computer graphics, working with computers to make images. It did start in 83, and kind of gradually I became kind of a full-fledged digital artist by about, I'd say 87, 86, something like that. So, but in 83, I was very interested in Buckminster Fuller and synergetics, so I made this model of octet truss, which was a space frame made up of octahedra and tetrahedra. So that kind of set the scene for drawings that I was doing at that time. This is actually from 84, but I could trace the vectors of that, a photograph of that sculpture, and sort of interface it with a figuration. And that was a big part of what I was interested in. Here's some details. I'm gonna go fast on some things because I probably have more slides than I have for 10 minutes, but you can come back and look at these. This is another piece called Void Matrix. It's graphite on paper. And it was just kind of thinking about perception and the notion of sort of the energetic matrix, the unified energy field that could commingle with our sort of standard perception of the world. There was a bit of surrealism going on, of course, but here's that space frame. Here's, this is a distilled cuboctahedron, which emerges from that octet truss structuring. And then I know I've showed this slide before, but this is so important to me. And like, how did I find out about computer graphics? Was through Gene Youngblood's expanded cinema class at Art Center College of Design, which was purely a survey course. And I saw Ed Emschwiller's piece from 1979, and I got introduced to the work of Woody and Stain of Vesulka. So in 1983, there was this exhibition at the Long Beach Museum of Art called The Artist and the Computer. And a lot of the work was work that was done in the 70s, maybe early 80s as well. And here's a better slide of the artist in the show. And, we have Darcy on the left here, Darcy Gerbarg. We have Nina Sobel in the right column. So there's a few people that we know, part of our group, that are pioneers from this era. So it was a very much a historic show, and that had Frank Dietrich, David M., had a great impact on me. And I went to see a lecture that had James Blinn and David M. And I came across, it's not in the slideshow, I came across another lecture with Nina Sobel, and she was talking about her brainwave drawings in 83 as part of the show. So I took a workshop in 83, kind of algorithmic work with Frank Dietrich, who is a computer art pioneer from the 70s, originally from Germany, but he had moved to the US. And in 83, he was based in Long Beach, and he was teaching a workshop. So that was in 83. And then in 84, I took this class at a private college called West Coast University. And it was taught by, I have these highlights here, Tony Longson, who is from the UK. Many of you know Tony. And the class was called Art 222, Introduction to Computers in the Art. And, down here on the left, you can see the equipment they used. It was VAX 11 730 and Evans Sutherland PS 300 workstation, and an AED 767 frame buffer, etc. So this was the sort of the tail end of the pre-personal computer era. It's still 84. Personal computers are already disseminating widely in the early 80s. In fact, this is the same year that the Macintosh came out, but it wasn't, I couldn't find it in universities such. I had left school by then, but I wanted to get hands-on. So it was one of the things I did to do that. And Frank Dietrich is here as well. So then in 85, then sort of getting into personal computers, I got into this access to a paint system. And these are examples, just sort of croppings of tests I was doing in 85 on the True Image paint system. This was PC. And then also this was also running on the same computer that had the Cubicomp, which was a 3D modeling system. So kind of dabbled in that. And because I was into polyhedra, I kind of gravitated towards that. So I'll kind of go through some pieces. This is the source photograph for Ectoplasmic Kitchen, and here's some early variants before I overlaid the sort of geometrical matrix. But I'm working with color shapes. This was a 2D program. So I got access to the Cubicomp that had 3D modeling, but I got a gig with a company that made speaker support slides, is what they called them. This was before PowerPoint software. You hired a company to make computer slides for you. So it was a 2D program, or 2.5D, called Artwork. So after hours, I would make work on it. There's MC Escher influence, and there's kind of that's another way of kind of thinking about this energetic field, is using tessellation, zoomorphic tessellation, influenced by MC Escher. So here's another, you could see my workflow starting with photographs that I've pulled from the world. This is just kind of at a friend's backyard at a children's birthday party, 83. And then 5 years later, with the Cubicomp and paint system interface, basing it on that photograph, I made this piece called Semiotic Outback. And I used the term semiotic, the signing, just kind of the play of a hexagon, and how that can work as a face of a polyhedron, or it can be a floor, a tiled floor going into space. So that was that. So many of you remember this, the floppy disk. This is how we saved work in the early days, early 80s. This is from actually 1989. This is another series called A Wired Couple. Just working with it. Didn't really, the series was called Wired Couple. The name of the piece and the name of the series emerges later, but I had this notion of the Wired Couple. And, I have these like temporary names, Jumbo 4, Jumbo 7. I'm not sure exactly why that was, but here's the finished piece from that. There's once again the Cubicomp, polyhedra, overlay of geometrical form. Here's another one, a little more developed. These are from 1989. I believe most of what I'm going to show you is from 89. So this is, I was an artist in residence at, this is the wrong caption, a place called the Video Image in Torrance, California. And this was this Cubicomp system. This is a still from a video that was shot, and I'm working on another iteration of the Wired Couple. So some readings, I thought it was cool that some of the presentations included some of the conceptual readings. So this is from my analog media phase, which actually conceptually informed my digital work, still does really. This was an influential book, Magic Mirror of MC Escher, and this book on polyhedral visual approach by Anthony Poog is a brilliant book. He was part of the Buckminster Fuller, community. These are two other books, that Perception and Mysticism, Separate Reality, the Carlos Castaneda books. This goes back to the middle 70s. The Tao of Physics, I've talked about before, was very influential. This was Ideas and Integrities. Buckminster Fuller was the first book that I really actively, as an art student, delved into. I had heard of Bucky since '69, and I had heard of Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth, but this is the first book that I really sort of like got in there and saw the relevance for making visual art. And then the Holographic Paradigm, edited, and Other Paradoxes, edited by Ken Wilber, was a very influential book, a collection of essays, science, metaphysics, holographic paradigm. This is a one page from an essay by William A. Tiller, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I still remember this to this day. And there's these postulates. There's 5 postulates, and these jumped off the page to me when I first read this book in about 1980. Number 1, space is embedded in the domain of spirit. 2, this is a 6-dimensional Euclidean space rather than just the 3-dimensional Euclidean space that one perceives at the purely physical level of consciousness. Space is a hexagonal, close-packed lattice of active nodal points rather than a continuum. So this was like complete affirmation that sort of visual metaphor, that graphical metaphor for interpreting how perception and consciousness operate spontaneously as we perceive the world. So that was very influential.
Victor, you'll need to wrap up.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to go fast. This is an important book, Digital Visions. There's a piece by Darcy Gerbarg, this tile piece, this further affirmation that the M.C. Escher tessellation was alive and well in the digital domain. This is a piece called Two Philosophers. Let's go through it. Later was put on the cover. It's 1991, but the piece was from 89. These are newsletters. The community was important. L.A. SIGGRAPH was quite active. These are the newsletters. Had a piece in there. A lot of information that was dispersed, and then culminating, this is the last slide, all of that decade of 1980s, my personal development and my personal development and my interface with the community sort of culminated to this moment in 1990, Art 1990, at collaboration with LA SIGGRAPH and Easy TV in West Hollywood. And so I was in that show, and we had Vibeke Sorensen, we had David M., we had Rebecca Allen. So that was a exciting moment, and it just began the 1990s, and it kept going from there. So anyway, thanks so much.
Thank you, Victor. Beautiful work again.
Thank you.
Just really, really interesting, the perspectives there. So I appreciate your presentation today.
Thank you.
Okay, next artist is Annnette Weintraub. Annnette, welcome.
Hi, let me share my screen. Okay, so oh, I don't want that. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So like many of my generation, I was trained in traditional media first. I was a painter, and I'm going to focus on work from the mid to late 1980s. And in the 1980s, as I'd been like since grad school, I worked with ornament and architectural imagery. And the series of paintings that I'm going to show first as a way of introducing my digital work explored the visual language of ornament that came out of architecture and then extended to other environments. And I was making a series of small paintings that were hung in grids of 9, 6, 9, or 16. I don't have any slides of the installation. These were in a show in 1987 at the Leonard Pearlson Gallery, but for some reason, I only had a series of slides with black backgrounds. So in the PowerPoint, they look very flat, but they actually were not. So this is, let me go back. This is a set of 4. And it occurred to me very much later that they have a lot in common with my recent virtual still life work. I've been working with 3D models and doing panoramas, which is something I keep coming back to, and also virtual still lifes since about 2018. So I've kind of come a little bit full circle. So these are some of the early paintings. I also worked with different kinds of multi-panel pieces. So unfortunately, the slide doesn't show that they were 3-dimensional paintings. They look very flat because I cropped them out of the black background. Okay, and that's the last painting. And I was aware, oh, let me go back. I was aware of was aware of computer technology primarily in relationship to typography because I was doing graphic design at the time. And I was a big fan of this magazine called Upper and Lowercase, which was the magazine of the International Typographic Corporation. And they were very advanced in writing about the coming digital revolution. I didn't really know any other source. I appreciated Richter's presentation because it showed that so much more was going on the West Coast than in New York, I think, because I certainly was very active in the art world, but I really wasn't aware of that volume of activity in New York City. But in upper and lowercase, they were highlighting how the computer could be used not only for graphic design and typography, but also for art and animation. And their articles probably went back to the 1970s. Then in 1983, I started teaching graphic design at City College and City University. And I was encouraged by the dean to put together some courses in computer media. When I came into the college, the existing program was charmingly called commercial art, and it was kind of my job to update it. And we started talking about how to integrate computers. So the first system that we got was a proprietary system, but then in 1984, we moved to the first, I think it was a Mac 128K, and then an early Microtech scanner and some dot matrix and then laser printers. And for me, that really changed everything. So I started to think about how to adapt how to use the computer in my own practice. And by 1989, I had the first Mac 2, which was a color Mac. I don't think it was 32-bit. I'm not sure if I remember whether it's 32-bit or not. But I had my own access to the computer, and I started applying what I'd learned in my design courses in my own work. So my first step was to do some really rough crayon drawings. I wanted to make a series of computer images that were based on the paintings that I've been doing. And these were the basis for a series of color images. I was working in Studio 8, which was an 8-bit program. So that means only 256 simultaneous colors, and there was a lot of dithering. And I developed this way of working that kind of adapted or interpreted the way I'd been painting into the computer medium. So that's another one. It was there. I didn't have a tablet or a stylus. People have described drawing with a mouse like drawing with a bar of soap, which I think is really accurate. But I tried to incorporate the crudity of those tools into the kinds of images. But the thing that really attracted me to the computer was the luminosity of color and just the kind of brilliance of the color space. So I developed a method of overlaying different colored strokes on a kind of gray-green background, which was a bit analogous to how I did my paintings. And the forms, again, were derived from various kinds of architectural ornament. As someone else said, maybe Cynthia said this, there was no way of outputting these images. So I shot slides off the screen. And then later on, when I had access to better printers, I did some prints for archival purposes. So these are like from 1989. Then I guess it was also in 1989, I had a residency at Yaddo. And I'd been thinking about trying to make work that more directly engaged the computer instead of drawing upon my previous paintings. And I was also thinking about using photographic source material. So I brought a portfolio of scanned images to the residency. And I was also interested in just exploring black and white. I was very interested in noir film and the kind of dramatic effects of black and white as it applies to urban space. And this was the first image that I made using scanned photographs. It's very primitive. It's I kind of forced Studio 8 into a kind of transparency, but the program was really limited. The other advantage of working black and white was that I could print on rag paper to the laser printer, which gave me a fairly archival kind of print. And I was really concerned with output. The next series, in the next series that was also architecturally based, I began to use the patterns that were built into the early programs. And these were like lines and grids and bricks. And they were essentially dithered patterns that could be used to create an analogy to levels of gray. I used them not only for their gradations, but also as texture. And they also have a feeling of reflecting the kind of pixelation of the images.
Couple minutes to go.
Okay, I'll speed up. The next series, by the time I started the next series, I was using Photoshop, which had more capability in terms of layering images. And I started a series called Disintegration, Reconstruction, that was about the urban environment and the constant process of renewal and destruction that you see in the city. And these images I output at about 31 by 47 inches. They were tiled, which means that they were printed on probably 12 or 16 separate pieces of paper with an overlap and crop marks. And then I assembled them and laminated them onto museum board to create a large image. And it was the tiling was a very tricky process. I don't know if anyone remembers doing this at the time, but you had to be like incredibly precise, or the paper would stretch because of the slight bit of moisture in the glue stick, and the images would become unaligned. But I got very good at it, and on my tile prints, you really can't see any seams. So that enabled me to work much larger and have an output that was fairly archival. And these were shown at Isaiah, which was maybe the second or third Isaiah. They were shown at the Fine Arts Museum of Long Island, and they were reproduced a lot in various Photoshop books. The next series came from a trip that I took to Las Vegas, where I became totally blown away by neon light and artificial light. So this series is called Night Light. And they're also tiled and laminated in the initial prints, but I used a phaser print, which was a kind of wax-based print, again, on rag paper. And they,
Annnette, can you wrap
sorry,
up? Thank you.
yeah, I'm just gonna kind of quickly go through these. These were shown in an exhibition that was organized by Aperture that traveled for 2 years. And I just want to end with my switch to making web-based art, which I started to do in 1994 after I'd seen an image come. It was actually Hiroshige's The Great Wave come in on a fast connection in one of my colleagues' labs. And that started me on a series of web-based pieces that incorporated writing, sound, animation. This one was shown in a show that Roz organized called Code. The one that I did in 1999 was in the first biennial that showed internet art, and it was basically QuickTime panoramas using audio, GIF animations and on-screen text. So, am I out of time?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you. Let me stop sharing.
Sorry to cut you short. Appreciate you. Beautiful work. Again,
Thank
it's
you.
just stunning to see the progression of going from analog to digital and what was capable. So thank you so much, Annnette.
Well, thank you.
Well, I'm going to bring up the rear here. And unlike all of my predecessors here, I did not start as an artist working with technology. And what I want to show here, there we go. This is a recent piece that I did just this past week. So this is where I am today. And just over 40 years ago or so, I was a game designer. I had left a traditional role-playing game working on Dungeons and Dragons, and I went into working in the video game market, working for Coleco. And we had 16 colors to play with, actually 15 because one of the blacks was for transparency. And we had a wonderful 256 by 192 pixels worth to be able to display things. One of the games that I worked on was Spy Hunter. And this is what it looked like on a traditional television set back in the day. And that's the actual size. And so you could see the limitation on color. And we were working directly on hardware. And so there was no programming language. The programmers had to actually talk to the hardware. We got to do game manuals that went with the game, and the artists had some fun, and they did a caricature of me as Dr. Torpedo. So that was kind of a fun thing. And during the early mid 80s, the arcade games were the fascination all across the country, putting down your quarter to play a game. We did Donkey Kong and other arcade systems for the ColecoVision. Here's a screen of Zaxxon. And then in '83, there was a groundbreaking game called Dragon's Lair that used laser discs in order to play traditional animations, beautiful animations. Don Bluth and Rick's. And so we didn't get to do the beautiful animations, but we got to do the gameplay part of it. And we also had the license for 2010, the movie after 2001 Space Odyssey. So we did a couple of games that I got to work on for that. But then the video game industry collapsed mid 1985 or so, and all of the folks that were working at Coleco got laid off, and I decided I never wanted to work for a big game company anymore, so I created my own small one-man operation. And during that time, from the mid 80s to the mid 90s, I was working on emerging technologies to create not games for the consumer market, but games and entertainment for amusement parks like Disney World and such. Did a lot of prototyping. The only product that I managed to actually get published during that time was I got hired by Coleco as an independent designer, and I got to do the AI for the talking Cabbage Patch doll. The doll had a bunch of sensors internally. And so what I had to do was create a finite state machine that said, okay, if the doll is lying down, if you get it upright, what's it going to say? If you squeeze it, is it going to cry or laugh? It also had an IR sensor in there to tell whether or not other dolls were nearby, so dolls could talk to each other. It was really, really fascinating. After that, I got to work on some laser technology and also early virtual reality. And I did a number of VR games back in 94. In 95, myself, a couple of the VR programmers, and one of the business guys, we started our small game development company called Indigo Moon Productions. We got a number of programming contracts through Interplay. We did a couple of different games there, licensed for the United States Chess Federation of chess game. During this time, I was working on a very interesting game. I saw that the rise of the internet was going to be something big. We had 3D technology based in our company, and I knew that the merging of 3D with the internet was going to be something really, really profound. So I worked on this game. There was a combination of 2D, 3D. It was a ritualized sword fighting game, so it wasn't a button masher like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat. You actually got to create a warrior, and you strategized your fighter by creating various different kinds of sword technique moves. We had gone out to California, did motion capture with a bunch of martial arts swords fighters, and we used that as the basis for the game. And so we did this game. It got published. It was really, really quite successful. You have to remember, back in 99 when this came out, a 28K modem was the standard. AOL was still the mode that most people were getting on the internet by. And so it was really groundbreaking, and is probably the most proud game I ever worked on. I'm the happiest with this game of all the things that I ever worked on in my career. But then the .com collapse happened, and since we were located in small Louisville, Kentucky, and not in California, all of our contracts basically dried up, and we had to shut the company down. Myself, a couple of the other guys, since we knew that 3D and the internet was going to be something groundbreaking, and that everything was heading that way, that's what we focused on. And so we ended up coming out with a prototype product where we actually loaded 3D program onto a music CD. And if you put the CD and you had a computer, what we did was we created this 3D environment for the band that you could go online, and it was a way for you to interact with the band members online. As far as I am aware, no one has ever replicated this ever since then. Unfortunately, timing is everything, and I think we were too far ahead of the curve. We tried meeting with record companies, and at that time, they were all worried about streaming media. And if you remember, there was a whole lot of controversy going on about who owned the rights to you know, the artists and all of that. So unfortunately, even though we did this cool stuff, it never materialized. And then I ended up started getting burned out. And so I was teaching at a local university, game design. And around 2010, I just gave up and said, I want to become an artist. I want to use my creativity, the things that I learned during my 30-year career to create artwork. And I started doing that based on photographic images that I was taking. And then here I am today as part of the Techspressionist community. So that was my whirlwind introduction to seeing technology advance over the years and how it related to what I was doing. So thanks to all the artists today. I'm really, really grateful for all of the work that was presented. And hopefully we're doing okay on time, Colin.
Yeah, we're all good.
Yeah, I
Go ahead.
know that probably each person who presented last time and this time could have spent the whole hour going through all of their work and their careers. So, you know, take this as a little snippet, looking at this across a dozen or so artists who presented, and realize the wealth of experience that's in this group and how much technology has transformed our lives during this time frame.
Absolutely. This was a really great salon. I'd encourage anyone watching on the recording on YouTube to check out the previous one as well, which was part one of this two-part series, Origins, both of which were moderated by Michael Price. So thanks so much, Michael, for you know, taking the initiative to put this series together and selecting the artists, all that kind of great stuff. And thanks again also to all the presenters. Really amazing, you know, look back into the origins of where we're at today. You know, the term and a bunch of people, you know, it's been said to me many times that the term Techspressionism puts a name to something that's been happening for a long time now, way before the community was formulated or before the term existed. So it's kind of cool to have a, you know, a platform that can bring, you know, all sorts of different types of artists together from all different working periods, styles. You know, I feel like we have a lot to credit Helen Harrison for really stressing the idea of you know, defining Techspressionism as an approach versus a style. I think that's what's really allowed it to encompass so many different types of artists and different methodologies, figurative and abstract work, you know, and really the approach is that we're all using technology in an expressive way. So there are a number of interviews of the people in this series on the site already that were conducted earlier in the group's existence. And they're online at techspressionism.com/interviews. So you could see some full depth conversations of a bunch of the artists in this particular salon and the previous one there. I also would encourage any of the artists here or watching the recording on YouTube to propose interviews where they would interview another artist or they could team up with another artist and be interviewed by them. But this is kind of a format that we've been doing for a while now. Want to give props to Roz Dimon for coming up with the interview format. And that's kind of a set of questions that, you know, we use as a starting point to do the interviews. And the idea really came from Interview Magazine, which Warhol started. And that was kind of the idea of artists interviewing artists. So instead of having a, you know, a journalist approach an artist, it was one artist interviewing another, which I think really provides an interesting perspective. And I think I really, enjoy these salons. It's incredible that the salons have been going this long, and to see both, new faces coming in, all the time, but also to see a lot of the people here who were in the first, the first handful of salons, really. I know Michael was here from the get-go, really, with these salons, and there's kind of, a core group of members that I think really, keep this community going and active. And we, it was said that in the beginning that, we've definitely become more organized in that we have the next couple of salons planned out already. There's going to be a great salon coming up on AI that Renata Januszewska is going to be moderating, and we have a number of salons coming up that focus on exhibitions that artists in the group are going to be putting together. There's a salon coming up for a show at the Cape Cod Museum of Art, which is up, I believe, it closes this weekend, Renata. It's a two-person show with Renata Januszewska and Karen LaFleur, which is an incredible piece of video art. And then we have a large-scale upcoming show that's curated by Tommy Mintz, called Techspressionism 2025. It's Hello Chelsea, actually, Techspressionism 2025, which is going to be our first group exhibition in Manhattan. It's going to be at the Hudson Guild Gallery, which I believe is on 26th Street, which is a very exciting development for the group. And also a salon coming up for a four-person show that I'm a part of in Chicago called Four Techspressionist Artists, with myself, Renata Januszewska, Karen LaFleur, and Jan Swinburne. That's going to be a really exciting project, large-scale video installation. So there's a lot of good stuff happening, and we're also going to be resuming our open mic or / open studios format, this summer, at least for a few salons, where artists are encouraged to come on and share on whatever they're doing, or it might be based on a topic, but where I'll be more open and kind of like a free form format. So again, I'm going to close the recording out, but anyone who wants to stick around for the after party, that's basically a time that's off the record that people could hang out on Zoom. And a lot of times that's when topics for upcoming salons get decided upon, and or, other group initiatives. We do have another activity called virtual co-working, and that's headed up by Cynthia Beth Rubin and Cynthia DiDonato. And that happens every week. There's details on the techspressionism.com homepage about that, and also a way to register, a link to register for that Zoom. That's also open to the public. And for anyone watching on YouTube who isn't familiar with Techspressionism, these meetups are completely open to the public. They're free. We're an artist-run organization. Everything that happens here is volunteer-based. So yeah, that's kind of what it's all about. And I'd encourage anyone that wants to use the hashtag Techspressionism when posting on Instagram, and our actually our Instagram curator, Renata Januszewska, will see those posts tagged with hashtag Techspressionism for consideration on reposting, and also addition to our artist index. So that's how we've kind of grown as a community, is largely through the use of the hashtag on social media. So to kind of demystify how this all works, it's not really, a situation where there's gatekeepers in the same way that much of the art world functions. So it's based on self-identification, which is, I think, a very important aspect of the group. And also, we are a community that embraces diversity, inclusivity, and all of those good things that are exceptionally important to acknowledge at this current point of time in history. So yeah, we're going to keep on keeping on with that as well. So I am going to close this out, and anyone who wants to stick around, please do so. We will stop the recording in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and cut.